Today, actually, we have a recorded session. I'm not meeting you lively, but this is a pre-recorded session, and we are planning to complete the discussion on financial institutions, which we have started 2 weeks back. And sorry, today let's finish this discussion on financial institutions. And I hope you remember and you follow the discussion that we had on financial institutions in the previous weeks. We were talking about financial institutions other than the central bank. Central bank is a unique financial institution, and we have discussed about the central bank in a separate session in detail. And thereafter, we started discussing the other financial institutions. Other financial institutions we can broadly categorize into two. One is financial intermediaries, the other one is service providers, financial service providers. Last week, we started discussing the financial intermediaries, especially being the prominent or major financial institutions. We discussed about the uh, banks. So that was our discussion last week, and today we have completed the discussion on banks, and also we looked at the risk faced by banks and how do we mitigate these risks. That part we have covered. Today we are moving from that point onwards, which means as we have already covered banks, we will be very briefly looking at the other financial institutions, other intermediaries first. Then we will look at the service providers in the financial system. So let me go to the slides uh, that we have been discussing last week. Uh, I hope you can see my slides. Uh, as I said, we discussed about banks, and we stopped somewhere here discussing the risk and risk management practices of banks. Uh, Other than the banks, as financial intermediaries, we can identify a couple of intermediating institutions. Some are depository institutions, as you already know. Some are long-term institutions. Some are some kind of a specialized institutions. Now, among other depository institutions, as financial intermediaries, we can observe non-banks or non-bank financial institutions, NBFIs. They are playing a major role. Non-bank financial institutions, they provide banking services mainly without meeting a legal definition of banks. In other words, these institutions, they don't have a banking license, but they are also providing actually the banking services similar to banking services. Now, if you look at these list of products or services that I have given in the second bullet, this NBFI, they accept deposits. They have time savings deposits. They cannot have current accounts because they are not what do you call uh, commercial banks. So as a result, they don't have current accounts. But other than that, they can accept other type of deposits. They make loans, credit facilities. They have different savings products. Investments are done. For money transferring, they are helping, and also some of the NBFIs, they support investments in property, uh, preparing feasibility, market studies. All these things are done by them. If you look at this list, you will see they are very similar to banks. So that's what I said. Non-bank financial institutions providing broadly banking services without meeting a legal definition of a bank. Now, if you look at the best example from our own context is finance companies in Sri Lanka. These finance companies, they are not banks. They don't have a banking license, but they are actually acting like banks. Some finance companies are actually bigger than the banks, but you can't call them as banks because they don't have a banking license. So they don't have a banking license, but still they provide services very similar to a bank. So in a modern financial system, they are actually providing an important service because it is considered that these NBFIs, they are providing services to a kind of a different segment of the financial system. Now, in the banking system, mostly formal sector players or credit-worthy institutions, they can, basically get funds from the banking sector. But there are some, categories, especially small and medium scale clients and less credit-worthy clients. For them, the most important or the most uh, 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 the ideal way of having their uh, facilities is the non-bank institutions, because as I said, uh, the banking service similar to a bank, they are also providing banking services. So depending on the type of the client or the customer, I think non-bank financial services are important for a kind of a, we call them as subprime category, which means they are not 100% or very, standard credit worthy borrowers, but they are also part of the financial system. Okay. Then we have uh, merchant banks and investment banks. Merchant banks and investment banks, they are actually uh, by nature they are similar. Even if you call them merchant or investment, uh, they are actually similar. Sorry. So as I said, these merchant banks and investment banks, they are quite similar in terms of their activity, but there are some differences as well. Now let's look at the merchant banks and investment banks. Normally, merchant banks are working with companies that are not large enough to raise funds from the public. Raising funds from the public means you are basically going to the stock market or any stock exchange to raise equity or debt, private debt. Now, there are some firms, they are big enough or well established enough to, to be listed in the stock market, but some are not. They are like, medium, small scale entities. For them, the best way to have funds through the merchant banks. So these merchant banks are helping to issue securities for these uh, small or some relatively small entities. So what type of securities they can offer? Even they can offer, some kind of shares which are not listed on the main boards, and also they can issue some other papers like corporate commercial papers. So that is also possible. And when they do it, they don't need, you know, tight regulatory requirements. So when you issue shares, I think you have to adhere to certain regulations, certain requirements. But small entities, they may not be able to fulfill all. So for them, merchant banks are ideal to issue securities which are fitting to their circumstances. And merchant banks are also helping for loan syndication. Loan syndication means you pool different lenders to create a large loan. Portfolio management, which means asset management, investment, and similar services, and financial advisory in terms of financial planning, etc. So this is the role of a merchant bank. Investment bank is a little bit different. They are also providing a similar service, but the difference come as they are providing services for issuance, trade, and investment management services in a formal or large scale. Now, for example, for a well-established company, if they want to issue shares, if they want to go to capital markets, they choose investment banks because they can help in those issuances. So these investment banks underwrite and sell securities to the general public through IPOs. IPOs means initial public offerings, when shares are issued for the first time. For the company, the investment bank can help to issue shares. So when they do it, they can perform a function called underwriting. Underwriting means is a kind of a guarantee. If, let's say, the share issuance is not fully subscribed, company issues 100 million shares, but not all is subscribed. So in that case, the investment bank can help. Bank can buy that balance portion. That's a possibility by the investment bank. So in that sense, they are like giving some assurance that the shares would be sold out, or securities will be sold out, facilitating to raise the required funds by the company. And not only that, these investment banks are having high expertise on finance matters and investment matters. So they advise on mergers and acquisitions, investment portfolio management, also research, market research, and all that. They are carried out by the investment bank. So I have listed, based on this key roles, I have listed some of the functions played by investment banks on the right hand side. But mind you, some of these activities could also be doing by a merchant bank. The only difference, as I said, the merchant bank is mainly helping to companies which are not that large enough. But investment banks, they are basically or mainly supporting to the large companies. So here, based on that, I have listed down, as I said, management of securities issuances, underwriting security issuances. I told you that's basically buying unsubscribed amounts. Margin provider for investors. Margin providing means basically providing a facility, loan to the investor. Now let's say a particular investor wants to buy shares, but he doesn't have money. So the margin trader or the margin provider can provide those funds to the investor. Advisory services, as I said, a lot of investment banks, they provide advisory services, helping in acquisitions or mergers, which means in modern world, companies get together and form new entities through mergers and acquisitions for the purpose of to become larger and stable. So for those matters, investment banks can help. Then we have leasing companies. Leasing companies, I think, are very common, very familiar type of business and a term for us. As you already know, a lease is a kind of a contractual agreement with the two parties. We call them as lessee and lessor. Lessee means the owner, user of the asset. If it is asset, car or a vehicle or whatever, building, it is an asset. The person who's using that asset is the lessee, and he is basically promising to pay the lessor, which means the owner, for the usage of an asset. So in this business, there is a leasing company usually and a lessee, which means the user. So the leasing company is generally considered as the legal owner of the goods, which means when you are entering into a leasing contract, you basically don't have the ownership. Ownership is with the company. So sometimes you call them as absolute owners, absolute ownership. So company keeps the ownership, but it is conveyed to the lessee. Lessee is basically incurring all benefits, costs, risks associated with the ownership of the asset. But until the last lease rental is paid, the ownership lies with the leasing company as the absolute ownership. So what is the significance of this company? They are helping us to acquire an asset in this process by providing the funds that they have collected, maybe from an investment or maybe from a depositor. Those funds they provide as lease facilities for the customers to basically by way of a contractual agreement. Then we have building societies and credit unions. Both these institutions are uh, similar. By nature, both these institutions are similar, uh, but in the process that they are operating, there are some differences. A building society, these are actually very common in European countries, especially in UK. They are very popular. The building society is a kind of a financial institution owned by its members as a mutual organization. So the members of the company are having the ownership of this building society. Now it's like the cooperative societies, what we have. The cooperative society, the ownership is basically with the members. So that is the cooperative. So building societies also, they are owned by the members, and what they do is they basically provide banking and related financial services, especially mortgage lending. So building societies, they are very popular in UK. Their main role is to provide loans for mortgage facilities. Credit union, Again, it's a member-owned financial cooperative controlled by the members. So their main role is to basically promote thrift, means the savings, providing some credit at competitive rates, providing other financial services to their members. Now, one important feature of these credit unions, they are offering services as banks, as I already said, but they have some different terminology. For example, for share accounts, they call savings accounts. Or for savings accounts, they refer the term as share accounts. For checking accounts, they call it share draft accounts. Certificate of deposits, they call them as share term certificates. So the word and the concept of share is extensively used for credit unions. As I said, they are popular mainly in the European countries, European region. Then we have microfinance institutions. I think the term microfinance is very common, a buzzword where you hear everywhere in modern days. Basically, providing some financial service for the entrepreneurs and small businesses who are having some issue or lacking access to banking and other related entities, mainly banks. So by definition, they are basically focusing on small entrepreneurs without having a proper access to the banking system. So in that sense, they are basically like underserved. So how this microfinance is implemented? There are two major types: relationship-based lending or banking, which means individual entrepreneurs and small businesses. They do banking under this microfinance. Group-based means several entrepreneurs, they come together and apply for the loan as a service group. Sorry, they apply for a loan and other services as a group. Now, this group model is very common in countries like us. I think the microfinance idea originated especially in the case of Bangladesh. A person, namely Muhammad Yunus from Bangladesh, he basically initiated this concept, group-based model, group-based lending, particularly targeting the female segment of the society. So they realize if you give a provide a group-based lending for a bunch of ladies, that will be a kind of an effective way of giving loans and recovering it. Because generally it's considered female entrepreneurs, female borrowers, they are good in paying back loans. They are good in finance related matters. So that concept is taken here for this group-based model. Mainly, you have entrepreneurs or other borrowers who are working as a group and also who's having a very good quality of taking loan and servicing loan, and doing everything on time. So this is significant because especially for the vulnerable segments of the society, the microfinance can play a bigger role. So providing loans to the needy people or to the unserviced or under privileged people is a kind of a good model of, applicable for a country's prosperity and development. So microfinance institutions, they are providing facilities mainly, as I said, for low income people, small loans, insurance, advisory services, etc. There are various ways of supporting the microfinance sector by these companies. Then we have insurance companies. Insurance companies are like long-term savings institutions. In an insurance agreement, you keep an agreement while paying a kind of a premium. So that premium is actually collected by the insurance company, who acts as an intermediary. So that's why you call them as, it's a kind of a deposit, long-term depository institutions or long-term financial institutions. So what is an insurance? It's an arrangement or agreement to protect from or provide compensation for future value loss due to any unforeseen event. We take an insurance because of the risk that, as I said last week, the risk is everywhere, not only in finance. Everywhere you have a risk. Even though you drive a vehicle, you take the elevator, you walk on the road, everywhere you have some kind of a risk associated. Even health risks are there. So in finance also such risks are applicable. So in order to minimize sorry, any future loss due to any unforeseen event, insurance can work as a kind of a buffer. So insurance company, the carrier, sells the insurance. The insured or the policyholder, we call them as policyholders, buys the insurance policy. The amount of money that is charged for a certain amount of insurance coverage is considered as the premium. So the premiums are paid generally in a regular intervals, mostly monthly or quarterly. So that payment of premium helps you to keep the insurance policy alive or its function. So insurance companies, they collect premiums, invest and generate investments, pay out losses. If there are any loss, that is basically absorbed. So what type of insurance we have? Long-term, general. I think those are the most common way of classifying. Long-term means life insurance. Sometimes it is combined with health insurance. General means motor insurance. If you say I'm having a general insurance, that means you are having a motor insurance. Reinsurance means even the insurance company can ask for an insurance, reinsurance. This is done mainly the people who are in the cargo industry, the ship industry. So most of these cargo vessels or ships, they are actually reinsured, because if something happens, the goods available in the ship is insured. But if something happens to the ship and all the things, there is no way that you can have a compensation. For as a result, you can get a reinsurance from another entity, other third bank. So there are business parties involved like insurance brokers, insurance agents, valuers, loss adjusters, who people compute and look at the losses incurred by company. All these are related to insurance company. Then we have factoring companies. The idea of factoring is there are third party companies who are helping with capital for the businesses in exchange of their unpaid invoices. So if you are a company, you need to have some funds, and to generate such funds, you can use this factoring. Because when you have some unpaid invoices, you are running with a liquidity problem. You don't have enough money. So that unpaid invoices, sometimes you cannot collect on time. It might take some time. So your cash flow problem will not be resolved. So as a result, the factoring company can help you. So the factoring company will buy your invoices. On the other hand, the business can sell the account receivables. So these invoices are account receivables which we are going to receive in the future. So they can sell these account receivables to a third party. The third party is the factor at a discount. Why do you sell it at a discount? The factoring company, the third party, should also have some benefit. That's why. So these factoring companies are helping business owners to cover their expenses, immediate cash needs until their customers pay. I think there is a missing word here. You have to add it here. Help business owners to cover business expenses, immediate cash needs until their customers pay back. Okay. So factoring company is charging a factoring fee for this service. Then we have cooperative banks. As I said, those are some member-based institutions that help to mobilize savings and stimulate the agricultural investment mainly. Now, cooperative banks, even in Sri Lanka, they have a sizable or considerable history with some sizable impact, especially on the rural sector. So in the rural sector and the agriculture sector, these cooperative banks are operating even in Sri Lanka. Central bank is not regulating these institutions. They are registered under some other, I think, government department. So central bank cannot regulate them. Their main role, if you look at, to provide some funding for construction activity, sorry, for agriculture activity mainly, because these agriculture activities are based mainly in the village areas and among, I think, the people who are living away from the center. You call them as people living in the periphery. So those people, these corporate banks are helping helping in a good way to mobilize their savings and use those savings for the development of those areas and the activities. Usually, as I said, they are owned by the members. They have a kind of a control. They have the mechanism. Usually, they are regulated under banking and cooperative legislation. Usually, but in Sri Lanka, as far as I know, these cooperative banks are regulated under cooperative regulation and legislation operated by a particular government department. It's not under the regulator or the central bank. Then we have pension funds. Pension fund, usually you call them as contractual savings institutions. Pension funds as well as insurance companies, they are also, I think probably I'm not so sure whether I mentioned it. These insurance companies, they are also long-term contractual institutions. Similarly, pension funds are also long-term contractual uh, institutions. Why? You basically deposit or contribute money for a longer period. So pension fund, usually you call them as superannuation funds. Superannuation means funds what you get at the retirement. So these pension funds are providing some retirement income for you. Generally, what we observe with regard to pension funds, they are very large of money to invest because they are large. They are contributed by the working people, and uh, that is accumulated over time. It's a huge amount of money. So they invest in listed and private companies. You look at the experience all over the world, they are having investments even in the private sector and also the government sector. In Sri Lanka, mainly the pension funds are investing in the government sector, which means they are buying government securities mainly. And also you can classify them as defined contributions, which means the legislation or the act or whatever have some contributions defined, benefits are defined, and some funds are actually fully funded. Fully funded means that the establishment, the funds are actually allocated. Underfunded means basically they are grown with the members' contributions. Usually the government pension schemes are considered as fully funded. The government allocates funds. Underfunded means something like, as I said, the true member contributions, they are basically grown. So in a defined, as I said, a defined contribution plan, the employers are actually not only the employer, employee, both, they are making contributions to the contributory scheme or the pension fund on a regular basis. So regularly, let's say monthly, you deposit your contribution along with the employer's contribution. You don't do it, employer will deposit on behalf of you, but the both contributions are taken together and deposited in the fund. Defined benefits also in the same way, it's basically defined at the beginning, right? When you enter into the plan. Then we have unit trusts. Unit trusts are, sometimes you call them as mutual funds. Mutual funds, they are like small funds, small in the sense compared to the stock market, they are relatively small. They collect funds, savings from general public as small units. So they raise funds from the public by issuing units. So people, public, they buy, say, these units or sell these units accordingly. So what is the purpose here? The unit trust is helping to gather small type of retail investors. Some small investors, like people who want to, person who wants to invest 5,000, 10,000, he doesn't go to the stock market because it's not a big amount, very insignificant amount. But for his money also, a value or benefit can be drawn if there is a unit trust, because unit trust is a combination of various units. I mean, units are issued to the customers and small units. The unit trust itself is a combination of all these small units. So in that sense, it helps to mobilize capital even from the small segment or the people who do not have much capacity in terms of investments. You can attract their funds as well. So other than that, the unit trust works similar to a stock market. You have, current price, the selling price and all that. Your buying price is there. So if you can sell your unit at current market price, you can basically get some profit, or depending on the purchase price. And also unit holders, they get dividends annually from the profit, which means, as I said, very similar to stock investment. Only thing is, stock investment can be done in a large company, even in large scale. But in a unit trust, you do it, but as small units. You have a collection of unit holders. Escrow companies escrow companies holding money and documents between the parties. If there are two parties, the escrow company can be a third party, a neutral third party, facilitating the buying and selling any asset. So it's a kind of a escrow company is a kind of an intermediary to facilitate a transaction. Now, in order to complete a transaction, what should happen? You have to make payments, you have to receive assets. Likewise, there is a process. Sometimes it may not be sometimes there could be some miscommunications or some delays or even some defaults in the transactions, because you are dealing with another person. So there could be defaults as well, as I said, or there could be some other usage of funds for different purposes. Now the best example is let's say you have a company, apartment building company. So the apartment building company collects money from the apartment buyers. Now after that collecting money, they use it for construction. That's the process. But sometimes they collect money, they don't use it for that construction, but they do another construction, use that money for another project, construction or whatever. So what will happen? That is, there is no guarantee your apartment will be built on time. There's no guarantee that your money will be, worthwhile. So as a result, the escrow companies can help. Escrow company can maintain an account for you. You deposit money in the escrow company, and the escrow company will give you the give the builder developer money to develop. So there is a kind of a guarantee or a mechanism that the money is utilized in an effective way. So not only money, even the securities, funds, other assets can be held in an escrow account. It's a kind of a facilitating arrangement as a third party in the buying and selling of assets. As I said, the best example is real estate transactions. The real estate market, the escrow company plays a big role to ensure that the money is utilized for the building purpose. Then we have different financial service providers. Let's look at these different service providers now. So these different service providers we have, starting with financial advisors. So financial advisor is a kind of a professional who's rendering financial products and services to the clients. So by name, it's a kind of an advisory service. He can advise you on the financial products, services, and he can basically set up a financial plan for you. For example, if you have a certain amount of money, you can ask financial advisor to give some advice to set up a plan for you, how to utilize funds, how to basically make a return, how to maximize the return, what are the prudent investments. Likewise, on any aspect, investment, insurance, mortgages, savings, estate planning, retirement plans, any aspect, you can get a financial advisory service. As I said, I think last week, most of the banks in Sri Lanka, they do financial advisor. Merchant banks, investment banks, they are in this financial advisory service. In other countries, there is a special profession called financial planners. So these financial planners are very similar to these advisors. They set up a plan for the clients and sell the products, right? If you have a retirement income, how do you make a kind of an meaningful investment? Those are supported by the financial advisors. There are fund management, asset management companies. A fund management or asset management company is a company that helps to invest client money in the securities, in the financial assets. So if I have money, I can get the help of asset management company to manage those funds on behalf of me, because maybe I'm not having enough knowledge or time or commitment to, you know, make profits or make money out of the uh, money I have. So for that matter, asset management company can help. They can manage my funds on behalf of me. They can invest in various investment avenues. They can generate returns. They can provide me some new investment alternatives. Diversification means putting money in various investment avenues. So asset management companies are helping for these investment purposes. Brokers. Broker is also a financial service provider. Broker, or sometimes we call them as brokerages, brokerage firms. They are arranging the transactions between the buyer and a seller. In most cases, the buyer doesn't know the seller. Seller doesn't know who's buying. The broker's role is to, you know, facilitate this transaction. He would say, okay, there is buyer A who is willing to buy at this price. He would say, okay, there is a seller B who is willing to sell at this price. So the broker's role is to match this transaction, help this transaction to happen, execute the transaction. So it's a kind of a third party facilitator to do a transaction. So after that, he can earn a commission out of that. One example in Sri Lanka, the real estate market. In the real estate market, there are brokers, right? In the real estate market, you basically find out who's the buyer and the seller. But in the financial market, the brokers, they don't. Now, for example, we have in Sri Lanka money brokers. So money brokers are helping to do money market transactions or forex market transactions. So when they facilitate that transaction, they don't know who is the, I mean, each party is do not know who is the buyer, who is the seller, by name. They only know the price. So as a result, they furnish some important information regarding the prices, products, and market conditions. And for the efficient price discovery process, the brokers are really helpful because they create market conditions to happen. So as I said, they earn a commission. Now, other than brokers, there are, maybe I have missed that slide. Let me check. Yes, I think you have to make a note here. We have brokers and there are dealers as well. Dealer is different from the broker. Broker is facilitating a transaction. Dealer is actually entering into a transaction. He buys securities on his account, for his account, at a particular price. We call it a bid price. And he is selling that asset at a particular price, which you call as the ask price, the selling price. So the difference between buying and selling price is actually his profit. So in that sense, we can say brokers are buying and selling securities for their own account. Why do they buy for their own account? To make profits. What is the profit? Difference between the buying price and the selling price of a security. Now the best example in Sri Lanka is the primary dealer market. Primary dealer market means primary dealers in government securities. They buy government securities from the primary auction dealers, and they sell those government securities to the clients or the investors in the secondary market. Let's say they buy at 95, they sell at 100, so they make a profit. So in the government securities market, you see these dealers. Brokers you can see in the stock market, as I said. Stock market, there are stock broking companies. They are helping to execute a transaction between the two parties and they get a commission. Okay. Then we have venture capital companies. Venture capital means, actually the word venture capital means the startup capital. Startup capital is important. There are some investors, there are some entrepreneurs or business people who wants to have a kind of a business, start a business, start a venture which is having a long-term potential, but they don't have money. So that money can be provided by a third-party investor, different investor. So in venture capital, investors come and provide money, investment for startup companies who have some potential. Let's say a company, newly opened company, they have a good potential in IT, BPO business, or they have potential in manufacturing something, but they don't have money to make it commercial. So in that sense, venture capital companies, they can help these companies to grow. So that in that way, the venture capital companies are helping to raise capital or access the capital market in order to enjoy funds or in order to have the funds for their activities. So in other countries, in advanced countries, not only the companies, even the high net worth individuals, people who are having, excessive money, very rich people, they can become venture capital providers. They are coming to, countries like us seeking for investment opportunities. So we call them as angel investors, So angel investor means who's coming as an alien and giving you some, hand to support the business. In Sri Lanka, it's not that popular. It's a small venture capital market, I think, especially in the renewable energy sector. Very small. But in some other countries, this is a very popular type of a financial service. Payment service providers are there. Payment service providers means there are various companies or entities offering online facilities for electronic payments. For example, for credit card, debit cards, direct debit card facilities, bank transfers, real-time transfers through online banking. All these are actually provided by a payment service provider. Banks are providing these services, isn't it? Credit card, other card types, RTGS facilities, real-time facilities, fund transfer facilities. All these are provided not by the bank itself. They are relying on a payment service provider, a different entity under payment and settlement activities. Now, if you look at credit card companies, they are like such companies. So a credit card is issued by a company giving the holder an option to borrow funds. So these cards are facilitated by, not by the bank. There are card providers, card companies. For example, I have mentioned here a few: Visa, MasterCard, Amex. Those are the companies who are providing this credit card or issuing these credit cards for the banks to use these cards to be used by the uh, clients. Okay, credit card companies are financial service providers. Money changers are there. Money changers are there means basically they are helping to exchange currency to another currency. For example, in Sri Lanka, there are money changers, banks. They can change one currency from exchange one currency to another currency. They can buy dollars and exchange into rupees. They can buy dollars. They can give you sterling. So these changes are helping to exchange the currencies. Dealers, I think I have this what I have said earlier. The entity stands up ready, willing buy and sell securities for their own account at bid price and ask price, and that is the profit. Exchanges are there. They are also financial service providers. An exchange is an entity or a marketplace to trade securities, commodities, derivatives. Now, for example, in a stock exchange, you trade stocks. In a commodity exchange, you trade commodities like oil or gold or whatever. In a derivative market, in forward market or in swap market, you act as an exchange, right? So it's a kind of a marketplace. Now, one important feature of a exchange is it's an organized setup. It's a regulated, organized setup. For example, shares are issued, as I said, under some regulatory requirements, under some framework. Even the bonds are issued in a kind of a framework, some organized or regulated environment is there. So the exchange is helping to trade these different type of assets. Securities depositions, sometimes you call them as depositories. There you store your certificates and transactions in a CDS. Sometimes you call it, as I said, CDS, Central Depository System, or Securities Deposition. Whatever the name, the idea is the transaction details are stored and the security is stored until the transfer is happen. For example, if I buy shares, immediately I don't get shares into my account. It has to be processed through the CDS. So once it is processed, that will be transferred to my account. So the depository is helpful to keep securities at one location and also to facilitate this smooth the clearing process. Clearing means transfer from one to another after the transaction happens. Okay. Then crowdfunding. Financial service provider under financial, there are crowdfunders. So crowdfunding is similar to venture capital. In venture capital, what happens? Venture capital companies, they seek for a startup company and come and finance. Crowdfunding is basically you raise small amounts of money from large amount of maybe investors or from the people, mainly through the internet. So through internet, you create a crowdfunding platform and you market the project. So if investors see that project as a viable thing, they would come and join you through, internet. So that is basically you are gathering a large crowd for your investment. I think the best example for crowdfunding is some artists, they make films using this crowdfunding methodology. For example, let's say you want to do a film and that costs around 50 million. You don't have 50 million. So what you do is you basically create a crowdfunding platform through a crowdfunding company to raise funds. So if people think your film will be a, box office one, basically, will make records of earnings, then people will come and invest as a part of that venture, as a part of that project. So crowdfunding is a kind of a, as I said, collection of money from various individuals. I think with that we are done with the uh, materials, in the sense basically what are the different types of financial institutions and their basic definition. If you follow my discussion, I didn't go into too much details of these different entities. The reason is we need to have some basic understanding what is their basic function. So I think that's well enough. If you have some idea about the basic function and the importance of those functions, that's enough. But about banks, I think we should have some adequate knowledge or some deeper knowledge about banks, because they are the most important uh, institutions. Now, I think in the following slides, we have some, past paper questions. Maybe we can look at a couple of questions in order to understand the way of answering. Now, here I have, I think, 2019 questions, because we don't have any questions from 2020. Here we have from 2019. I'm just looking at some questions from the very latest paper. Now, for example, in 2021 January paper, this is the paper after 2019, because we didn't have a paper for 2020. It's a combined paper. So there is a question on financial institutions intermediation process. Question number 2, part 4. So the question asks, briefly explain the functions of the Securities and Exchange Commission of Sri Lanka in facilitating financial intermediation process. Now, I think you remember I told you the financial system has two types of finance: direct finance and indirect finance. Through indirect finance, mainly intermediation happens. Okay. As I said, the banks, non-banks, they are doing intermediation. In direct finance, it's like a disintermediation, where the people directly go without having any third party. But in that case, the market is acting as a kind of an intermediary, isn't it? The market itself, it's a kind of an intermediary, bringing excess funds and channeling those excess funds to the deficit units. So here, The Securities and Exchange Commission is actually acting in the financial market. It's not an intermediary. It's kind of a facilitating financial transactions. So if you write the role of the Securities and Exchange Commission, that will be enough for this question. So what is the role of the Securities and Exchange Commission? They are regulating the securities market. They are the main regulator. They also regulate listing of new securities. It could be shares, it could be debentures. So if anyone wants to list means if you want to trade in the stock market, you have to be listed. That listing is done by the Securities and Exchange Commission. Not only that, they are also licensing the companies. They are giving license to some other market players, like in the stock market you have different players. For example, you have stock brokers. As I said, we already see brokers and dealers are there. There could be margin providers. Margin providers means basically people who are giving credit to buy and sell shares. For example, if I want to buy shares, I don't have money. I can ask for a margin facility from a provider. It's a kind of a loan. And there are, I already mentioned, there is a central depository, CDS. That is also regulated by the Securities and Exchange Commission. They also monitor the market, surveillance, supervision. All these are done by the Securities and Exchange Commission. They collect data. They are protecting the investors. Securities and Exchange Commission is there to protect mainly the investors, their interests. So that is the answer that you have to provide. Basically, you have to elaborate on the role of a Securities and Exchange Commission. So this is from the latest paper. So I'm just looking whether we can find out any question related to financial institutions. I hope you had a chance to look at the latest paper. There are some important, interesting questions on money as well. Right? I think directly related to financial institutions or intermediation, that's the main question. Now, in this question, March 2019, I think the question is very straightforward. Now, for example, the question asks, technology plays a significant role in modern banking. The invent of new technologies have helped to improve the efficiency of financial intermediation process. However, these new technologies have given rise to certain risks and threats that need to be managed. I think that's mainly focusing on the risk and the threats due to technological advancement. Now, question 1. If you look at the question 1, it asks, what are the describe online banking and list out 3 transactions that could be carried out with online banking. I think online banking, we already know. I discussed last week, remember, when we talk about banking, the banking transactions carried out through the internet mode or through the mobile app using a username and a password. So you basically rely on the computer or mobile phone technology to do this transaction. So what can you do using these online transactions? You can do basically, you can check your account balances, you can do fund transfers, you can make a utility bill payment, right? You can ask for some other additional facility or a credit card or a debit card. Those things also possible through online banking. I think most of you may have some kind of an online banking facility. If you visualize your banking facility, and whatever you do through that banking facility can be written as the answer here. Second question, compare and contrast the benefits and disadvantages of carrying out banking transactions over teller counters and ATM for customers and bank. Here in this answer, I think you can basically think of the possible answers. What are the benefits of an ATM? It's available 24 hours at any time, convenient, compared to a teller. Teller means the counter. Person who's serving at the counter is the teller. So there you don't have 24-hour service. Sometimes it's not that convenient or efficient. Sometimes there are long lags, queues and all that. ATM machine is having positives compared to it. Negatives are also there. With the ATM machine, you cannot negotiate. You cannot get any clarification, any support. There could be some cyber frauds as well. But with the teller, probably you can get additional support. You can discuss. The chance for a fraud is less. Likewise, there are various advantages. So third question, you have to identify the risk with the coming from the new technology. There are various risks coming from this technology. I think one good risk or highlighted risk is actually operational risk, right? When you rely mostly on the technology, there could be some operational risk because it heavily depends on the technology. Any breakdown could hamper your transactions or your activities. And also, in addition to that, the advancement of new technology is giving rise to cyber frauds, money laundering activities, even some people argue through this online new technology, the policy making is becoming difficult. Monetary policy, for example, the taking monetary policy decisions could be affected. And sometimes through the online transaction and technology, there is an issue with the KYC. KYC means you have to know the customer when you facilitate a transaction. So there is a issue with the online banking and new technology. You cannot detect the customer. So as a result, in modern days, people talk about eKYC, electronic KYC, know your customer through electronic media. So those are some of the, I'm just giving you a outline. You need to look at the marking scheme. Explain why cybersecurity is important in today's banking institutions. Briefly explain 3 types of cyber attacks. Now, in the modern world, most transactions are processed through the internet. So it's really important that we have to have a secure cyberspace and the transactions to have effective transactions without having any problem. But there are some risks in cyber transaction. So cyber security is at certain risk. What are these risks? There could be some cyber attacks in different ways. I think as you already know, there could be some hacking. Cyber attackers or hackers, they could hack your computer or your email or whatever. Your data could be stolen. Your your actions could be affected. Malware, there. Malware means some computer viruses. Those can be, released malicious softwares in order to disrupt your transactions. And also nowadays we know this phishing activity. Phishing means phishing. Phishing means it's like fake emails, fake accounts. They ask you to deposit money for these fake accounts, websites. Sometimes they ask you to divulge your information. So likewise, there are various cyber threats. Those are affecting the financial market and the institutions. And the September question again, I think you can look at the marking scheme. I'm just giving you some outline the way to answer this question. Now question again on financial institutions and about the risk faced by the financial institutions. The first one, banks are not only the financial institutions that act as financial intermediaries in the modern economy. Do you agree? Explain your answer with examples. As we already know, banks are not only, there are various financial institutions, not only the banks. Banks are the major financial intermediaries. But we already know there are other financial intermediaries like non-bank institutions, leasing companies, there are merchant banks, investment banks, there are stock market related entities, dealers, stock market related entities in the sense the margin providers, depositories. They are like helping the intermediary process, as we already discussed in the first question. Insurance companies, right? They are also financial intermediaries. Pension funds, they are also financial intermediaries. So you can provide a lot of examples. Number two, explain how smartphones help to enhance access to finance in the modern society. I think the phone banking is considered as the most important way to access the finance. Now, accessing the finance means you have to access financial institutions and financial products through physical access. I think accessing a bank, accessing another institution, the physically, it is kind of a in most societies, in most countries, it's like there are some hurdles in the sense some bottlenecks are there. But the phone is providing you a kind of a digital platform that these financial institutions are delivering their services through the digital platform, especially the smartphones. Now, related to smartphones, probably you may remember we have discussed this digital wallet, the smart wallet, which means helping you to do some transactions using money, and you can do online banking through a smartphone, and you can use different types of finance related or smart money related apps in the smartphone for their activities. And nowadays people talk about smart passbooks, e-passbooks, right? Now you don't have physical passbooks. Those are also supported by the smartphones. And now one good example for this financial inclusion, I think, from Kenya, they have money called the mobile money called facility called M-Pesa, right? So this M-Pesa is mobile-based money transfer, smartphone-based financial transaction system. So in Kenya, most of the people have been captured through these MPs are enabling for them to do extensive banking activities through the smartphone. So this is a very benefit. Although there are some risks, mainly it has some benefits. Third one, explain why risk, credit risk. Explain credit risk and liquidity risk. I think last week we discussed in detail what is credit risk, what is liquidity risk. Credit risk means simply the possibility of default. Liquidity risk means the inability to convert into cash or with an unavailability of adequate cash. So credit risk and liquidity risk, they are related. Why? When people do not pay, when they are defaulting, the bank could lead to a liquidity risk because the bank doesn't have enough money. When people pay only, bank have liquidity. Banks have money to honor other customers' requirements. So if people are defaulting, the bank doesn't get any cash flow. That has some impact on the bank itself because the bank will be short of cash. That will be liquidity risk. So I think there is a clear connection. List down 5 differences between demand deposits and time deposits. I think it's very straightforward. These are not actually related to financial institutions, it's financial products. But I think you can, very easily give an answer. What are the differences between a demand deposit and a current account and a time deposit? We will discuss this in detail, but at least a few you already know. For example, a current account does not earn any interest, but a time deposit earns interest. Current account does not have a kind of a fixed maturity, but a time account, you have a kind of a maturity, maybe 3 months, 6 months, 1 year, likewise. And in a current account, you can withdraw at any point, anytime. Time deposit, you cannot withdraw very quickly. You have to give some, at least some prior notice. When you have a current account, some additional features are available. An OD is available, overdraft, a checkbook is available. But for a time deposit, you don't get a checkbook or even a passbook. You don't get for a time deposit. It's only a certificate, basically showing your balance. And also the current account is used for day-to-day transactions for working capital purposes. But time account, time deposit, you basically keep it for investment purposes, isn't it? You don't use it for day-to-day transactions. And banks are charging some fees for current accounts, but for time deposits, the banks do not charge. They pay your interest because the current account does not, create value to the bank in terms of, because they can't use money for investment purposes. You have to keep money ready in ready form every time through the current account. There will be transactions. Demand deposit means every time there could be withdrawals. But time deposit is a kind of a relatively long-term investment by the customer. So you can keep money for some time, and as a result, you can invest as the bank. You can invest and earn some money out of that, and that earnings enable you to provide a kind of a compensation for the owner of the time deposit, which means you can give a interest there. So likewise, I think if you look at these questions, I think these questions are very straightforward. It's not hard. It's not that difficult. Only thing, if you look at these questions, you have to do 2 things. One thing, you have to know what are the institutions available in the financial system with their services. And the other thing, when you look at these questions, you would see the new developments you have to be aware, especially the online banking, smartphone technology, smart banking, even the financial technology, cryptocurrency, digital banking, digital finance. All these new developments are actually plugged or linked to this discussion. So in that sense, you have to have some clear understanding about the financial institutions and their modern developments as well. Okay. With that, I think we are basically done with the financial institutions. We actually spent something like 2 weeks, closer to 3 weeks actually, to discuss these financial institutions, because this is really important. We have to have a holistic or broad understanding about all the financial institutions operating in the financial market, because they are offering different products. Now, when we go to the next session, you will see different institutions are having different products. They are having different type of transactions. Their significance and the role is different. The risk that they are facing is different. So likewise, we have to have some clear understanding about various institutions, various financial institutions, in order to us for us to understand the their role and their significance in the financial system. So what we have done up to now, I think, giving you a very comprehensive understanding about the institutions operating in the financial system. Probably as banks, other institutions are not that significant, but they are also, if you look at, their role is also significant, because they are providing various services. Sometimes a bank not be able to provide their service without the support of other institutions. Now, a very good example is modern banks. They are providing payment facilities, right? So to provide payment card facilities like credit cards, to provide online transfers and all that, they should have a support of a payment service provider. So that's why we need to understand the role of these institutions, because no institution is able to work in isolation. Especially, as I said, the banks cannot do their activities without the support of others. And also, one of the important feature that we have observed from this discussion, most of the institutions, they are not actually specialized into one area. Now, for example, modern banks, they are not only providing banking services, they are also providing some other services: investment advisory, payment facilities, even investment support, for example, stock market activity, government securities activity. The banks are also engaged into those areas as well. Okay. So I think that comprehensive understanding is important for us to understand these institutions. Okay, as I said, this is a recorded session, so I didn't ask any questions from you. I was just talking, and probably I may have, during my talk, I may have repeated certain things to make it more clear, and also to make it very focused. Next week, we are moving to new discussion that is on financial markets and instruments. I think we are nearly, reaching the end of our course. I think in 2-3 weeks time, we will be able to finish. Our plan is to finish, I think, before the new year. So probably two more sessions, 2 or 3 sessions will be our focus to discuss our subject coverage. Okay, so let's stop here. I'll meet you next week. Thank you, and have a good day and good week.